Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name's Jeremy. When my wife's brother showed up and started using my equipment without even asking me. At first, I thought it was just a misunderstanding, but I quickly realized I needed to draw the line and put my foot down. What I didn't expect, though, was how both my wife and her brother would react to that. Things got dark way faster than I ever thought they would. And to really understand how everything went downhill, I need to take you back to how things were before all this even began. I've been married to my wife, Maria, for 6 years now. At first, things were okay, normal ups and downs, like any couple. But for the last 2 years, honestly, it hasn't been what I expected or hoped for. Things changed, and not in a good way. Maria's behavior shifted, and it felt like she started to constantly undermine me, especially when we were at home. I don't want to say she was cruel, but the way she talked to me, the little comments she threw around, and the constant bickering wore me down. It was like no matter what I did or said, I was never really respected in the way I wanted. It got to the point where I dreaded being at home. It felt like I was walking on eggshells every time I came home from work. To cope, I looked for something to keep my mind and hands busy while I was at home. Since I already work in construction, I decided to invest in some professional woodworking tools as a hobby. This became a real outlet, something I could focus on that was mine alone. It gave me a space away from the constant noise at home, both literally and emotionally. So, while the marriage was slowly falling apart, this woodworking became a kind of sanctuary for me. It was a place I could go. After a while, I started filming what I was doing. Sometimes I throw in some commentary. I figured maybe a few people online would find it interesting. I posted them to YouTube and Instagram with no real expectations. And then boom, one of my videos blew up. Then another. I started getting comments from strangers all over the world asking questions, giving feedback, and sharing the video with their friends. It wasn't just one fluke either. More and more people started tuning in. I was gaining followers and subscribers. Before I knew it, I wasn't just making sawdust and noise, I was making money. Enough that I didn't have to wear myself out doing back-breaking construction jobs every single day just to keep the bills paid. That changed everything. I reinvested most of what I earned into better tools. Precision routers, upgraded saws, high-end clamps, everything that could make my work sharper and more professional. The garage slowly transformed from a place I used to hide into a full-blown workshop. For a while, it gave me enough peace to keep going. But even that wasn't going to stay untouched. Not in that house. So one afternoon, I get home from work, exhausted, dusty from the construction site, just wanting to wash up and maybe spend a little time in the garage with my tools to clear my head. But as I walk through the front door, I see someone sitting on the couch, my wife's younger brother. I didn't even have time to collect my thoughts before Maria strolls in from the kitchen and says, "Oh, by the way, my brother's going to be staying with us for a while." Just boom, he's here now, deal with it. I'll be honest, I was caught off guard. And yeah, I was irritated. I mean, it's not that I hate the guy, but this is our home, and bringing someone else into it, especially someone with a history like his, should be something we both agree on. So I asked her as calmly as I could, "Why is he here? What's going on?" She said he had a falling out with his roommates and didn't have anywhere else to go. Apparently, it got so bad that he packed up and left without a plan, and she didn't feel right letting him struggle alone. I get wanting to help family, but what got under my skin was how it was all done without even a basic conversation. Her brother had a bit of a reputation for mooching off people. There's always some drama following him around. I reminded Maria of that, tried to tell her that this isn't just a short stay we're looking at. This is the start of a long ride, and I've seen this pattern before. He never leaves quickly. But she just waved it off. "It's just temporary," she said. So there I was, realizing that decisions about who gets to live under my roof were being made without me. It was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for at the time. But looking back, it was the first crack in a wall. For a while after Maria's brother moved in, things were quiet. Everyone sort of stuck to their own corner of the house, and I made a point to stay busy in mine. I kept that space organized and tight, everything in its place, dust cleaned off after each project, Equipment lined up neatly on the wall, like a mechanic's dream. I'd work long hours out in the sun doing construction, but the real joy came when I got home, changed into something comfortable, and lost myself in a piece of maple or walnut, shaping something from nothing. I even made a couple of pieces that went viral. A custom bookshelf, a hidden drawer coffee table, stuff that actually paid. It felt good knowing that what started as a distraction had grown into something real. I came home one evening, stepped into the garage, and froze. My drill set was out. One of the clamps I never leave on the bench was lying on the floor, half open. The workbench was dusty in a way that told me someone had been sawing something recently. My newest lathe, a machine I had literally bought 3 weeks prior, had a chip on the base. Nothing huge, but noticeable. It was like walking into your house and seeing someone else had slept in your bed. My heart dropped. Then it burned. I walked into the living room and found Maria's brother on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I asked him if he'd been in the garage. He looked up and said, "Yeah, I was just checking out some of your tools. You got a lot of cool stuff in there." I didn't raise my voice, but I didn't sugarcoat it either. I told him flat out, "Don't touch my tools again." I made it clear that I'd spent years building up that space, that equipment wasn't cheap, and it wasn't for messing around. He blinked like I'd just insulted him and said, "Chill out, man. I was just trying out some things. No need to act like it's a big deal." That's when I knew we had a real problem, because it was a big deal. And the fact that he couldn't see that or didn't care told me everything I needed to know about the kind of respect he had for me, and for the house I was trying to hold together. So, after I confronted her brother for going through my tools, I figured the most reasonable thing to do was to talk to Maria about it. I just wanted her to help me set some boundaries. I came to her calmly, explained exactly what happened, and told her that I didn't appreciate her brother using my equipment without asking. I thought she'd understand. But Maria didn't react as I expected. Instead of listening, she went on the defensive like I had just insulted her entire family. "He's just trying to check out what you do," she said, waving it off like it was nothing. I told her he broke something, and all she had to say was, "Well, if he broke anything, you can always replace it." That one hit me hard. She then said something that really got to me. "Why do you always make things a big deal?" It felt like I was some over-emotional guy losing his mind over nothing. For her, I was blowing things out of proportion just because I wanted my space respected. I stood there, trying to make her understand, but every word out of her mouth made it clear. She wasn't interested in hearing me out. She had already chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. At that point, I had to be firm. I looked her in the eye and said, "Tell your brother to stay away from my things." I meant every word. I wasn't going to sit back and keep pretending like I was okay with this. I thought this would be the end. Turns out it wasn't. Months passed, but nothing really changed. The promise that Maria's brother was only staying for a while turned out to be just that, a promise. He didn't move out. In fact, if anything, he got more comfortable. It got to a point where it was no longer just about him living under our roof. It was about him slowly taking over space that wasn't his to begin with. I'd come home after a long day, and once I got into the garage, things were moved around. Some left out in the open, some shoved into the wrong drawers. Expensive equipment covered in sawdust. I knew how I left my things. I kept that garage organized down to the last screw. But day after day, things kept being out of place. My measuring tape would be stretched out and jammed, drill bits scattered, blades dull and chipped. One of my newer sanders had a crack on the side. It was no longer just annoying. It felt like a personal invasion. That garage wasn't just a workspace, it was my peace, and he kept ruining it. I confronted Maria again. I told her that her brother was crossing the line. But instead of even acknowledging what I was saying, she flipped it. "Are you sure you didn't misplace that yourself?" she said, as if I suddenly became clumsy and forgetful overnight. She didn't want to believe me. She didn't want to hold his brother accountable. She chose to gaslight me instead. And that's when the tension in the house reached a new level. So I started locking the garage. Every time I left the house, I made sure the garage was locked tight. I needed a boundary. One evening, I pulled into the driveway just after sunset, a little more exhausted than usual from the day's work. But the moment I stepped out of my truck, I noticed that the garage door wasn't shut all the way. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to pull it down completely earlier that morning, but my gut told me otherwise. I walked over and saw clear marks around the latch. Someone had forced it open. I opened the garage fully and noticed things had been used and moved around again. I walked around the space in silence, checking shelves, drawers, and corners. More was missing than I initially thought. And the way everything else had been tossed around, it was like someone didn't give a damn about the value of what they were touching. That was it for me. I walked into the living room where both Maria and her brother were lounging on the couch, then looked straight at her brother and told him the next time he touched my stuff, he would be out of this house. I added, "This is the last time I'll say it." They looked up at me, confused at first, then amused. Her brother stood up and squared up like he wanted to fight me. "What are you going to do?" he said, stepping closer. "You going to cry about your little screwdrivers?" I was ready to engage. But Maria jumped in almost instantly, just as aggressively. "You're always acting like you're some king of the garage," she snapped, eyes full of contempt. "Maybe it's time someone put you in your place." And then her brother leaned in, smirking. "You think you own everything in this house?" I was stunned, but it didn't stop there. Maria crossed her arms and said, "You're not exactly irreplaceable, Jeremy. So stop acting like you can just lay down rules and everyone will follow." I stared at her. I couldn't believe this was the woman I'd shared my life with for 6 years. In that moment, I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a battlefield. I had thought maybe time would heal things if I kept being patient, and we'd find our way back. But I was wrong. Respect was gone. And without respect, there's nothing left to save. I didn't argue any further. I just walked out of the living room and headed to the garage. If they thought I was going to stay and keep tolerating that, they didn't know me at all. That night, while they were still enjoying their little power trip, I opened the garage and started taking stock. I gathered it all. My drills, sanders, saws, clamps, and the specialized blades. I took my workbench, some of my wood stock, and even the extension cords. I wasn't leaving any of it behind. Piece by piece, I loaded everything into my truck and just left. I checked into a modest hotel near the edge of town. I spent the next few days there, scrolling through listings, searching for a small space I could rent to work from. And in those few days, I realized I could breathe. I could think. I could just exist. What cut the deepest was that my wife never called or left a message. It was like I had vanished from her world, and she didn't even notice. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. When I finally filed for divorce, it wasn't a decision I made out of impulse or spite. I had tried everything I could to salvage a marriage that had long stopped feeling like one. I tolerated being sidelined, disrespected, and gaslight under my own roof. And the moment I realized that both Maria and her brother saw me more as an obstacle than a human being, I knew I had to walk away for good. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer and filed for divorce. Now let me tell you something, Maria did not take it well. I thought she'd be relieved too, that she'd want to move on and live her life however she wanted, without the burden of someone she clearly didn't respect. But no, she was angry. She dragged me to court and demanded everything. The house, the remaining assets, even tried to twist the narrative, like I was the one who had been irrational all along. I had receipts. Literal ones. Bank statements, tool invoices, video timelines showing who contributed what. But even with all that, family court is still family court. Months went by in legal back and forth. Lawyers tossing arguments, evidence, and proposals. It was exhausting both financially and emotionally. And in the end, the judge awarded Maria the house. She didn't get it handed to her completely. The court ruled she could keep the house, but she had to refinance it in her name. I walked away with less than I deserved, sure. That's often how the system works for men. Doesn't matter if you were the one disrespected. Doesn't matter if you were the one holding the house together. At the end of the day, the court divides assets, not burdens. And you're expected to swallow it with a straight face. Still, I'll tell you this. I would rather walk away with less money than stay in a house where I was treated like I was disposable. You can rebuild a bank account. You can't rebuild peace once it's been shattered by constant disrespect. Now here's the part one didn't expect. Within 6 months of the divorce being finalized, Maria lost the house. Foreclosure. Couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. I guess the independent act only goes so far when the bills start piling up. And her dear little brother? Yeah, both of them were kicked out. There's a lesson in that, but I'll let you figure it out. Soon, I started getting messages, mutual friends reaching out. Maria wants to talk. She's really sorry now. She's been thinking about everything. I shut it all down. Fast. I didn't go through all that pain just to circle back to it out of loneliness or guilt. I don't care how bad things got for her afterward. I made peace with my choice the moment I stepped out. And let me tell you, nothing is worth going back to a life where you're constantly made to feel small. So no, I didn't win everything in court, but I got my peace. And that's more valuable than any house or settlement will ever be. So that's where everything landed. Honestly, it still feels surreal sometimes when I look back at it all. But there's peace now. I didn't know I was missing for years until I finally stepped away from all that chaos. If there's anything I want someone out there to take from this story, it's this. Value yourself before someone else decides you're replaceable. Because once they do, they will treat you like you're just another piece of furniture in the room, something they can lean on, kick around, ignore, and replace whenever it suits them. I stayed in that house for years, thinking I could wait out the storm. That if I just kept the peace, maybe things would get better. But here's the truth, they didn't. They got worse. Respect is not something you can beg for. Once someone starts making you feel like your presence is optional, you owe it to yourself to ask, why am I still here? And for anyone wondering if I regret leaving, no. I regret not leaving sooner. That was the best decision I made for myself in a long time. If you're in a situation where you constantly feel unheard, I hope my story gives you something to think about. You deserve to feel safe and valued in your own home. You deserve a partner who defends you, not one who joins the attack. And most importantly, you deserve to feel like your space is your own. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have left earlier? Confronted things differently? Maybe handled it with more patience or less? I'd really like to hear your thoughts, so feel free to drop a comment below. I read them all. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. If this story resonated with you or made you think, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourselves and don't settle for being disrespected. Ever.